It's an honor to join you guys today. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak on this incredible panel. Just to put a timestamp on this, today is the 17th of July, 2023, and for the last 5 days, we junior doctors in England have been on strike, and that represents the longest period of sustained industrial action in NHS history. And we are sending a clear message to Rishi Sunak and all of the Conservatives in power that we will not stand by as they destroy our NHS for profit. This is a government that does not care about NHS staff or NHS patients. They don't care that we've lost nearly 32% of our pay in the last 15 years. They don't care that NHS staff suicides are at an all-time high. They don't care that 170,000 NHS staff left their jobs last year, including 41,000 nurses and 4,000 doctors. They just don't care. And that's why I voted to strike, because no matter how many alarms we raised over the last decade, no matter how many times we've seen patients come to harm because of unsafe staffing, no matter how many times we've seen patients die because of criminal-grade governmental neglect, no matter how many memorial services, I attended another one this week for colleagues who have taken their own lives, these Conservatives just don't listen to any experts, and that needs to end right now. Over the last 13 years in power, the Conservatives have overseen the greatest assault on the NHS in its 75-year history. And when Labour handed over the keys of the NHS to the Conservatives, 13 years ago, it was performing brilliantly. We still had a lot of work to do, but after a sustained period of underfunding, again from the Conservatives previously, Labour properly funded the NHS on par with their European counterparts, and the results were impressive. Because of Labour's investment in health, in our public health, 10 years ago, the NHS was ranked the #1 healthcare system on the planet. That's something I love to talk about because it's the absolute truth, and we cannot stop repeating this from now until the election, because they inherited the #1 healthcare system on the planet and they've run it into the ground completely. 10 years ago, not a single country on earth was delivering higher quality care for a better price than what y'all were doing here in the UK. It really is an impressive achievement. And that is Labour's legacy. And the party must not run away from that. That needs to be a critical element of the re-election campaign, because you guys put the money into it that was needed in order to fund public health, and the results proved that you guys were the best in the world. So that's why it's a bit alarming to hear talk from party leadership now about efficiency savings or reform, what Tony was just speaking about, or arguments about the NHS not needing any more money, because these are all fantasies with no basis in reality. NHS budgets are artificially swollen right now because they include all of the billions in stolen and squandered pandemic funds, and thousands of NHS contracts are with these private providers Tony just mentioned, who skim off 20% in profit while the rest of the system collapses. And 10 years ago, you guys had the most efficient healthcare system on the planet, and we had plenty to improve, but it was running like a well-oiled machine, especially in comparison to other wealthier countries. And then what happened? The Conservatives denied the NHS £40 billion every single year for a decade. That's £400 billion in investment over that time. And if you take the most efficient service in the world 10 years ago and you remove £400 billion from it in funding, it will collapse. Of course it will. And they intentionally underfunded it. They intentionally undermined it, passed the health and care bills in 2012 and 2022 that faced near universal opposition from health experts. It's terrible policy, and all of us spoke out about it, but this government refused to listen. Moreover, they failed to plan for the pandemic, and because of that, they're responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths. And you look at where the NHS is right now, we have an all-time record of 7.5 million people on the longest waiting list in NHS history. 500 patients are dying every single week in this country from preventable delays accessing NHS emergency care. And on the 75th anniversary of the NHS, it's barely holding on to life because of the sustained assault, the longest and most aggressive in the NHS 75 years. And so the challenge that we face right now, and one that I'm personally obsessed with, is how we legislatively protect the NHS from assaults like this in the future, because we must never again allow these con artists to destroy the best thing about this country. And so if I were health secretary, a dream job, how would we start fresh to protect the NHS? Well, first, we need to end the staff hemorrhage immediately. All public sector workers deserve a massive pay increase, and NHS staff, across the board, a 25% pay increase with future increases to match inflation, to ensure that pay never drops to this extent. Second, we need to reverse a decade of assault on our public services and must massively reinvest in our public health. That will be expensive. And under no circumstances should this come from existing NHS budgets. This pay offer that Rishi Sunak just announced is to come from existing budgets, for many governmental departments, and for NHS staff. That pay rise is going to come out of increasing the immigration health surcharge, which, as an immigrant, that means that I will be effectively, I will lose any pay increase to those immigration health surcharges, which is absurd, which is a terrible way to fund health service, terrible way to fund this. It's shocking that, in France, after the pandemic, the government offered French citizenship to pandemic key workers, while here we're now being faced with pay cuts and a tax increase from this terrible pay deal. The third thing that we need to do is we need an evidence-based government. We need a government that fiercely protects and defends health policy best practices to produce the best outcome, not for shareholders, but for patient health. And as Tony was just saying, this fiscal multiplier, we know that every pound that's invested in the NHS, we get 4 back in economic growth. This is a no-brainer. But will it be expensive? Absolutely. Will we need to make up for 400 billion pounds that have been stolen from budgets from patients over the last decade? We absolutely will. But the answer is not to take it from existing budgets or charge immigrants more of their health charge. The answer is simple. We need to tax the super rich. We just survived the greatest crisis in this country has faced since World War II, and we need to rebuild this country together, and all of us need to chip in. And those with the deepest pockets need to dig deeper as a patriotic gesture to help this country recover. A 2% COVID recovery patriotic wealth tax on income over 10 million pounds would be a great way to start. And people like Rishi Sunak, the wealthiest prime minister in history, and even, I'll say it, the billionaires of the royal family too, all have more than enough wealth to help this country in its time of need. And if they are true patriots, and if they care about the lives of their subjects, then this is something that they will do. They will not be put out on the street because of it. They will not be forced from their homes. They will still be obscenely wealthy, but they will be standing side by side their subjects during this greatest crisis that we faced in generations. And so this is an absolute necessity, because what this comes down to is that after all we've been through in the last 10 years, after the pain of COVID, are we rebuilding our society and our economy for billionaires? Or do we want good public services for everyone? Do rich folks want to wait hours for an ambulance when their loved one is having a heart attack so they die en route to hospital? Or do they want their loved one to survive? Do they want a safe transportation system? Do they want good schools? Do they want Britain to be competitive in the 21st century or not? If they do, as all of us should demand, we need to demand a new social contract that ensures success and prosperity for all, not just for billionaires. And to save the NHS and all of our public services, we need a wealth tax now. And that is the simplest, best way to do this. Again, thank you for all of your support on the picket line, for all of us NHS workers out on strike. And thank you for having me speak today in solidarity with everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us today.